What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the new Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson film, Baywatch. Baywatch is directed by Seth Gordon, stars Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Zac Efron, Alexander Daddario, and John Bass. It is the revitalization on the big screen of the old 80s show with David Hasselhoff and Pamela Anderson of the same name of Baywatch, the classic slow-mo running lifeguards on the beach, except this one decides to be sort of a rated R raunchy comedy similar to what was done with 21 and 22 Jump Street. It tells the story of Zac Efron, who is sort of a washed-up Olympic swimmer who was sort of a disgrace in his final race, and he's forced to join the Baywatch crew. While there, he meets Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who is the captain of this crew, and basically they get involved in this story about a drug dealer somewhere on their beach, and they have to solve the mystery, even though everyone is telling them that they're just lifeguards and they're not supposed to do that type of thing. The first thing that I want to point out about this movie, ironically, is the soundtrack. This movie has a really good soundtrack, really diverse in the type of music that it plays throughout, and it uses a lot of actual, like, famous people's music that maybe isn't as well known, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the movie. It's sort of on the side, but it was enjoyable. The big aspect of this movie is, of course, the comedy. This is supposed to be a rated R, raunchy comedy that people can go into and have a good time with. And I'll say that for the first half of the film, I think it successfully does that. It's definitely somewhat juvenile, and it's not as clever as the 21 or 22 Jump Street films, but the thing is after the first half of the movie, the comedy really kind of dies down. There's still moments, but it feels less like a comedy, and it feels like it's getting more serious when the actual story still really doesn't make any sense for it to be really dramatic. It had entertaining action sequences. The set pieces with like the burning boat and all the other fun stuff that happens throughout the movie look alright, and they're a good time. They add an entertaining aspect to what felt like just sort of a generic comedy for a little while, and it sort of brings back that Baywatch feeling of the classic TV show. All of the cast does a good job, and I think the script actually handled it quite well, having some big stars like The Rock and Zac Efron, but not sort of making it just The Rock and Zac Efron show. They let the other characters have their moments of comedy and success and fun and excitement throughout the action and all of the jokes that are had. It's not just the two of them. They definitely disperse it throughout the whole cast. John Bass, who I had actually never heard of before this movie, was sort of like the chubby sidekick lifeguard, and he was actually really funny throughout the film. I thought that in the beginning he was really selling his jokes. He really sells the awkward, weird sidekick guy, and I thought that he worked great throughout the whole movie, and I hope to see him in some more stuff because I think that he could work really well as another, like, side character that is actually really funny. He could maybe be like the rated R Josh Gad. The Rock and Efron were great in the movie. They both really sell the whole lifeguard aspect of it, but they also had this really fun back and forth between their two characters because they're just so different, and I thought that it added a lot to the film because it made it so you wanted to see the two of them succeed, but you also wanted to see the two of them sort of become friends throughout the film, and it was a fun back and forth between the two of them the whole time. Daddario, Robach, and Hedera, the three female members of Baywatch, were all really good. They all had really funny moments, and they all were also pretty badass in all the action sequences, and I really liked that. And a big thing about this film that I wasn't really expecting was that they didn't overdo the sexualization, because I was worried about that, because the old show did. I mean, the old show had Pam Anderson running in slow-mo, and this movie does that, but it does it for comedic purposes. It doesn't try to just sell you on sex and overutilize the aspect that it has beautiful actresses playing these roles. They actually use it to get jokes out of it rather than just using it to pull people into the theater. Now, this movie did have some issues. The villain, for example, was pretty generic. She was never really developed enough to where you cared or thought that her story was interesting, and she also never really got to explain it enough that it was like, oh, that makes sense why you would do this insanely extravagant thing for just this one small goal, but that's kind of beside the point since I guess the villain isn't the big point in this film, but she just sort of felt really generic. Some of the green screen and voiceover dubbing that's done throughout the film was really poor and really obvious, which I didn't enjoy because it always pulls me out of the fun action sequences or funny moments if I can tell that it was just like an afterthought of a dubbed line, or if it just looks really fake, and there definitely were a lot of moments in this film that looked that way, which was sort of upsetting. However, the biggest problem with this film was the script, because the first half was actually pretty damn funny. If the whole film would have been like the first half, this movie would be getting a pretty solid grade, and I'd be telling everyone to go watch it. But it really, really falls off in the second half in terms of comedy. I mean, there's the occasional joke, and I mentioned this earlier in the review, but it really gets dramatic, and not like dramatic to where everyone feels like this is an Oscar film or something, but it just takes itself a little more seriously. And it sort of tries to save itself a little more at the end to go back to the comedy, but it had already sort of lost a lot of the momentum that it had from the first half by the end, that the comedy kind of stopped hitting. And then, as I said earlier, this is sort of in the same realm as 21 and 22 Jump Street, as it's sort of revamping an old show. But 21 and 22 Jump Street were more clever, and I think that they had better scripts than this film, so this one sort of feels more juvenile in its comedy and the general joke telling that it has. It definitely was still funny at times, but it's just not as smart as 21 and 22 Jump Street were. I'm gonna give Baywatch a C+. If you enjoy kind of dumb comedy and can get past some of the bad green screen and how the script kind of falls off, I think that this is an enjoyable summer movie. It's a decent summer comedy. It's just not anything that's really worth remembering, probably. But if you like The Rock, if you like Zac Efron, it's definitely for you. Go check it out. You'll have a good time for 2 hours, because this isn't something that's going to go down as a great, like I think 21 and 22 Jump Street could, but it still was a decent time in the movie theater. Well, guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this review, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of Baywatch, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and hope to see you guys later.